Well, thank you so much for having me. I am super excited about presenting a topic to you that as Susan said, am super passionate about. I'm kind of that person who's always mentioning standards and guidelines and protocols until you don't want to hear it anymore. But I absolutely love this topic. I think it's absolutely vital. So I have no disclosures. I definitely want to thank Ashley Hodge in the pediatric community. As she said, when they began this project, they reached out to the ICEBP, and mostly only because we had kind of just gone through it. And I'm so proud of what they have become, what that document has become. I just think it's fantastic. Again, I definitely think there was a need to have an adult and a pediatric, as you just mentioned, sir. It's a whole different ballgame. So I'm really proud of this document, where it's become. This committee has been fantastic. Thank you to the Sanibel Conference Planning Committee for asking me to speak. I love AmSECT. I'm completely devoted to our profession, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I also want to thank the Perfusion community that helped create the document that I'm going to talk about, as well as the ICEBP, who is 100% devoted to our profession as well. I love the opportunity. I love meetings. I love to be educated and surrounded by people who are devoted. And this stuff really helps keep me grounded and motivated. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you so much. So today, the objectives of my presentation today is to provide a little bit of background and history behind the creation of AmSECT standards and guidelines, talk to you about how it became, what we did with it, those kind of topics. And I want to talk to you about why AmSECT continues to this day to invest their resources in this document. Basically, why are we still working on this and still talking about this? I'm going to show you some survey results from AmSECT International last year, talk to you about adoption as well as non-compliance. Ashley alluded to this in her presentation, and we're all in the same boat together with this. Then I'll talk to you with some real life examples about how the standards and guidelines can be used in your practice, what they mean to people that have used them, and provide you with examples of what it can do for your profession. And then finally, I'll end with updates to the document since its original release date of 2013. Since then, we've done some work since 2017. And so we'll kind of cover basically the document from start to end. The exciting thing about this document for me is that, as Susan mentioned, I'm on a lot of committees. I love to be a part of this process. But the thing that's exciting about the adult guidelines and the pediatric is that these documents were created by perfusionists. This was not, as Ashley mentioned, a group of 5 people deciding what's right for our profession. It was everyone. You had the ability to provide feedback. You had the ability to provide opinions and ideas. And so this document is a great example of the success of your efforts. And one of my favorite phrases is, this document was created for you, by you, which I think is amazing, because I think it does take a community input to create a document that's useful for everyone. So AmSECT standards and guidelines are the gold star of your profession. We just mentioned about liability, and I have been working with our legal team on something that I'm going to mention later. And I absolutely agree with Bill's question that if there's a lawyer out there, these are the documents they're going to be looking for. They're going to be finding these, and they're going to say, this is what your profession endorses that you do. And if you are not, I guarantee, after going through a legal thing on my own, this is exactly what they're going to look for, and they're going to find it. So if that doesn't provide you with enough motivation to get started, I don't know what will. But this is the gold star of your profession. We need to be thinking about this, and we need to be following it. There's been a lot of work done on this document. So I'm going to start with the who, what, when, why, and where, and how. I'm going to talk about who the group is, what these standards provide for you, when were they last updated, why were they created, where they are, and how you should use them in your practice, what they were intended for. I am part of the ICEBP, as we've discussed. The long title is the International Consortium for Evidence-Based Perfusion. And basically what our motto is and what we stand behind is that everything that we do, every project, every resource, anything that we come up with, our goal is to continuously improve the delivery and outcomes of patients. Everything that we do is to do that. So this is the group. It's growing over the years, which is super exciting. I am absolutely 100% blessed to be surrounded by these individuals. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to feel like I belong to a group that contributes to improving our profession as a whole. So what happened is in 2011, which was over 9 years ago, it was actually Susan's presidential time, and she asked the ICEPP to revise and update with what at the time was called the Essentials and Guidelines. So as Ashley mentioned, just like the pediatric ones, we started this document with the two categories, a standard and a guideline. The standard should be considered a mandatory requirement, and it fulfills the minimum requirements for safe cardiopulmonary bypass. We have 18 of them, and these use the word shall. Same category as the guidelines. These are considered a recommendation. These are also evidence-based. They are consensus-based. But these are the things that we think that you should be doing. We have 39 of these. So as we work through this document, one of the things that happens is as our profession changes, as research changes, some of these guidelines do get bumped up into standards. But we want to make sure that if it is a standard, it is something that everyone has the potential, regardless of resources, regardless of surgeons, regardless of staffing, that they have the ability to meet these minimum requirements. So a lot of time and effort gets put into the difference between whether we choose to call it a standard or a guideline. It's a very thought out process. So what do the standards and guidelines provide for your team? Well, the whole intention of this document is to provide you with a framework for practice. It defines the expectations of what a perfusionist should do, should offer, what a team should look like, and what resources that team needs in order to do well. It also reduces variation in practice. One thing I'm always preaching on is that a patient should receive the same level of care regardless of geography. Regardless of perfusionist, regardless of surgeon, a patient should walk into a hospital and have a certain level of expectations. And that's what this document provides, is that reduction in variation from perfusionist as well as institution. As I mentioned, this document was peer-reviewed. It was created by AmSECT members. The AmSECT members have voted on this document, and it was also approved by your board of directors of AmSECT. So this has been a large, all-encompassing document, and we have used, of course, evidence, right? Research, studies, data, everything that we could pull together to back what we were putting into the document. The classification systems, the levels of evidence, sometimes this is what we would use if we found research to determine whether it was going to be considered mandatory or recommended. So again, the research was done, it was put into practice, and then we evaluated whether it was going to be mandatory or recommended. The standards and guidelines also provide you with expert opinion. Now, I'm a reader, okay? I love to read research articles. I love to read AmSECT Today. I love to read JECT. But I do understand that there's something to be said about clinical experience. I mean, a perfusionist gets better every single case that they do. And so some of the practices that we do are based on that consensus data. So our profession doesn't have the research that other professions do. And so we have to rely on our clinical experience. And so there is expert opinion in here too. And those opinions come from, as I mentioned, the ICEBP, AmSECT members, as well as your board of directors. This document is the foundation and the structure of the healthy and safe clinical practice. And this should be considered how cardiopulmonary bypass practice should be done. This is the only document right now that is supported by your professional society that provides you with the framework, the definition of the expectations, and the reduction in variation. So it's backed by your professional society. Your professional society is saying to you, this is how you should be practicing. So when was this document created? And I have then, now, and later. And what I mean by that is that I told you how we started it, how Susan asked the group. It's being worked on now, and it will continue to be worked on later. This document is a continuous process of research, evaluation, data. As things come up, we update it. We're working on it right now. Again, it was created by perfusionists working together. This document is to help you and your teams. Now, this slide is a little bit busy. I'm not intending for you to see every single line, but if you can see, what it shows you is that from the very beginning when we started this, we created basically a draft. We presented it at a perfusion meeting. We asked for feedback. And believe me, we read every single line of that feedback. This document was created based on the opinions of perfusionists. We would take the feedback, we would submit it to the board, and we would vote on it again. And you can see that this process continues the whole time. We would edit it, we would submit it, we would vote on it. We would edit it, submit it, and vote on it. So this was a continuous process going for years and years. As I said, we've been working on this document for 10 years, and we're not done with it. So that's the exciting part. Why was this document created? AmSECT's entire mission is to provide the needs of the community through education and professional resources. And this is a resource that is backed again by AmSECT. As I mentioned, when Susan was president, she asked the committee to evaluate the essentials. She saw, as a group, her board of directors saw that there was a need for this, and we got to work. The other thing that motivated this is, if you guys remember when it was called the Institute of Medicine, we have to listen to what they say. They are our resource for success. And in this edition, this best care at lower cost, they indicated that professional societies, which is your AmSECT, should facilitate the development, accessibility, and use of evidence-based clinical practice guidelines. They told us this is what you should be doing as a society. So again, we got to work. So why do we continue to work on this? Several reasons. Obviously, to improve patient care. We've talked about that. Everything we do is to improve patient care. The other reason is that we are not, as a perfusion community, 100% compliant. And I will show you the proof of that. 10 years we've been working on this, and we're still not completely compliant. The other reason is that we need to make sure, as a community, as you just mentioned, this is our fault. If it's not out there in every institution, it's because we have more work to do. We have to figure out how to reach everyone. We all have different paths of learning. Some of us attend only the large meetings. Some of us attend only the local state meetings. Some of us get our points on AmSECT and team meetings. So we have to still figure out how to reach every perfusionist around and help them use this resource. So we have more work to do as a community. This document is on amsect.org. And the really important thing about this document, when we put this out, this was something I was very passionate about. This document is available to every single perfusionist, not just AmSECT members. We didn't want to create a document that was hidden behind a password. If you're going to create a tool for perfusion as a community, it needs to be available to the community. So every single one of you listening has the ability to download this document and use it. AmSECT's mission is to foster improved patient care. This is what we're trying to do with this document. We have over 2,000 members of AmSECT. I'm always putting in a shameless plug for AmSECT. There is so many opportunities available, and we need to do, Jim just mentioned it yesterday, we need to do a better job as a community that when we are creating these resources, perfusionists know they're out there. Not every perfusionist lives and breathes AmSECT, and we need to make sure that we're reaching those individuals. So one thing I'm always recommending, and I'll talk about more later, is print the document and put it in your pump room. And I'll tell you a little story about that. You can see here, it's under resources. So when you go to AmSECT, you click on resources and you scroll down to standards and guidelines. And that brings you to this. This is my favorite page in the whole wide world. This document has everything that you need. It has the standards and guidelines. It has the mechanical circulatory support guidelines, the pediatric guidelines. So those are the top AmSECT standards and guidelines that have been released for you. So if you haven't been on this page lately, you need to get there. You'll see down below, I don't really have a pointer here, but you can see, in addition to the standards and guidelines, we also have what we'd call clinical practice guidelines. These are the things that your team can use to back the protocols that you create in your institution. There's one on anticoagulation. You can see there's one on temperature management, inflammatory response, blood conservation. They're also working on a renal one. So these documents get updated, and this is where they go. The number one goal with this resources tab was everything you need to write your own standards and guidelines and protocols for your institution are right here. So how do I use the standards and guidelines, Shahna? I see it there, I hang it up. What do I do with it? We want you to think of this document as a guide for our profession, pointing you in the right direction. It's not about how you get there. It's not even about where you are right now. It's about the final destination. It's about getting your practice where you want it to be, where it should be, which is in line with the perfusion community. Our whole goal is to improve the delivery of care and outcomes for our patients with the classification levels, with the levels of evidence, with the research, with the consensus opinions. We want you to use this to provide your evidence-based patient care and improve your patient care. I'll switch over now and we'll talk about some of our survey results and non-compliance from the surveys that we did at AmSECT International just last year. So we asked the committee, or the attendees in AmSECT International 2019, are you aware of AmSECT standards and guidelines for perfusion practice, perfusion community, the adult document? Were you aware that the pediatric community was composing documents, composing a document as well? Has your institution adopted the standards and guidelines? Do you think that they're a benefit to your institution? And how do you use these documents? This was the questions we were wanting to know. Is it just the larger institutions that using them? Is it practical for the smaller institutions? All kinds of teams. So when we asked, we were super excited about the results of this one. We're like, okay, 96% of the attendees knew that this document existed. 58% knew the pediatric document existed. So that's good. That made us feel really good. Okay, we're reaching the community. We understand that this document is out there. Well, then we asked, were you aware of the latest updates? So again, this is an example of the committee working on a document, releasing it, and being excited about it, and then realizing people still don't know about it. And if they don't know about it, they can't use it and they can't improve their practice. So we need to work on our communication. We need to tell the perfusion community that we're writing new standards and guidelines, that we're working on the adoption, editing, and reviewing at all times. We asked, has your institution adopted some of the standards and guidelines as a result of the publication? 61% said yes. That's awesome. This question can generally be asked at any large AmSECT meeting and get the same answers. But you'll see, if we had asked this question at a local meeting, we might have more more of an opportunity. We might have more of an opportunity to reach these people that say 19% said no, that they haven't adopted them, and 19% are unsure, which means if they don't know if they're being used, then they're not using them, right? So we still have a large part of the community that still isn't using these. We asked if we thought that the standards and guidelines were a benefit to their institution. 85% said absolutely yes. So if you think about the math here, 85% said it's a benefit, 61% said, yeah, I think we're using them, but 24% of our community still was not sure that it's a benefit. Now, remember, this is an AmSECT meeting. So if it's 24% at an AmSECT meeting, what is it going to be like at the local meetings? What is it going to be like for the smaller community? So what this means to us is that we still, 9 years later, after the release of this document, we still have non-compliance. So what can we do as a community, as a committee, and as a professional society do to improve the use of these documents that are created? How does your institution work to adopt changes such as the standards and guidelines? We were curious where the resources came from. Was it the chief sets the rules? Was it your surgeon determines what you do? Perfusion team meetings, multidisciplinary team meetings to discuss adoption, or it varies. It was pretty exciting to see that the perfusion teams for most of the attendees were able to do it within their perfusion team and adopt it. Obviously, a long-term goal, which we've all been talking about this entire Sanibel meeting, is that multidisciplinary team meetings to discuss adoption. And what this means for us as a committee is that we are working currently to get these documents endorsed by other professional societies. In doing that, not only are we educating our surgeons and our anesthesiologists about this document, but by having them endorsed by other professional societies, it gives them more power, more enforcement that this document is important to all of the teams. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how standards and guidelines can be leveraged to improve your practice. How do you actually do these? So as Ashley discussed, you can use this as a management tool. You can help your team work together to say, this is what our team is providing. This is the level of care that we are providing. You can provide this document for administration knowledge. As we all know, sometimes they don't even know that the perfusion teams actually exist. We're a vital part of cardiac surgery, and yet there's this awareness that perfusion isn't even really there until something happens, right? So it helps give them the knowledge, and it also teaches them about the expectations from our professional society. You can use this document to help you as a bargaining chip. If you need equipment, you show them, this is what my professional society is saying I need to have in order to provide safe cardiopulmonary bypass. I do need to buy this, or I do need to add this resource to our perfusion group. You can use it for staffing. I know many people who have been able to take this document to their administration and say, listen, I'm supposed to be providing N+1 and taking care of my teams. And they have been able to use this as a leverage to add another employee, which is fantastic. And again, the financial responsibility, it provides you with the document to say, this is what's being expected by my professional society. So I did something fun for this presentation. I was super excited about it. What I did is I reached out to a lot of perfusionists that I know all over the United States, coast to coast. I wanted to know, what are you and your teams doing? I asked people who work in large institutions. I asked people who work in smaller institutions where there's only 2 perfusionists. I asked in the East Coast, the West Coast, everybody. I tried to cover everything. So I want to show you a little bit about this to help you understand how you can bring this to your team. The first response was talking about how this person used the standards and guidelines for ordering safety equipment, as well as the pump suckers, right? I'm not doing it just to annoy you. I'm doing it because this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Another individual said that this is how we decide any changes that we want to implement related to the standards and guidelines. Being in compliance with the standards and guidelines is essential to your success as a team. Another team member said that they're the foundation of their practice. The temperature management guidelines and anticoagulation that I showed you on the previous slides, these are literally printed and included in their department handbook, as well as my team. This is one thing that I joke, I hang them up, but I literally print them, hung them up, and put a sticky note on them that said, you need to read this. These are a great resource and a great backing. This perfusionist also used it to inform the surgeons. Listen, this is what our society says. This is what we're going to follow. Perfect. This perfusionist was able to use standard 7.13 for justification of capital purchase. So again, they were able to order a transonic device for distal flow because of this document. The next perfusionist, again, states that it's the foundation of their own policies and procedures. When we began the research for this document and we asked perfusionists at team meetings, instead of the 86 or 96% that knew the document existed, we had the exact opposite. We were genuinely shocked to find out that most perfusion teams at that point, 9 years ago, did not have policies and procedures. I'm a living example of that. Most of the places I've worked at didn't have these. So this is a great way to help improve that in your team. This perfusionist used it to hire. That's amazing. They got an additional staff member and they update their department protocols. This perfusionist, the second one, was able to actually establish hospital standards and guidelines. So this perfusionist was working at a place where they didn't need just perfusion protocols, they needed hospital-wide protocols. So that's fantastic. That's super exciting to hear that they're able to use this document for such a great resource. This real-life example presented the standards and guidelines, the pediatric ones, to administration, and they were able to alleviate some stress and some concerns that they were having. That's an amazing example of how to use this in your I was going to say in your home, in your practice. Standard 18.1 for this perfusionist, they were able to hire staff. And my favorite part of this comment is this last sentence here. We will run 3 operating rooms starting this summer, and this newly adopted standard will improve staff morale and, more importantly, improve patient safety. That statement right there is exactly what we're looking for. We're improving patient care while taking care of perfusionists as a whole. I love that statement. That perfusionist is doing a great job. This perfusionist, it helps them determine best practice. This perfusionist, AmSECT and standard guidelines, shows where a team needs to improve. You take the document, you print it out, and you highlight it, and you update your own policies. This perfusionist also uses the standards and guidelines for student learning, anticoagulation management, as well as data registry. This perfusionist uses it in perfusion schools, which I can now say I am a part of that community. And I also, my students know about these documents, probably more than they would like to, but I definitely put this into the school. You can see here, this perfusionist safest way to conduct care for our patients, as well as another perfusionist puts this into the perfusion training program. These are some great examples. This last person was able to, this last perfusionist said that they met as a team and they were able to identify the changes that we need. So these examples, and I wanted to provide you with several so you could understand how to use this document, bring it into your institution, you guys. This document is the power to provide you with the tools that you need to improve your patient care, to take care of your staff members, and improve perfusion as a whole. This document gives you the power that you need. Okay, I will wrap up my presentation here, discussing about the updates that we've made since the release. And I'm bringing this to you today based on that question. You know, a lot of people knew that the original document was there, but they didn't know that we did the updates. So I'm going to show you what we've done since the original release. Standard 12.1, the infamous surgeon perfusionist battle, suckers. I struggle with this at my institution. I have always struggled with this, and I am proud of teams that are able to say that they are no longer struggling with this. To me, that says that they work for a surgeon that understands the stress that it brings to a perfusionist when they say, no, 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 don't turn them off yet. We got a few more minutes. That increases our stress level, because at the end of the day, if that oxygenator clots off or we have clot in our circuit, that becomes a problem for us. So we asked, as a team, do you discontinue suckers at the onset of protamine? 62% of these attendees were able to say yes, but you see, there's still a large group that does not. Standard 14.1, standby. One of the reasons that we brought this up is when we released the document, this was one of the things that the perfusion community brought to us and said, hey, everybody's standby pumps are different, everybody's level of readiness are different, etc. So we asked, does your team have a written protocol for standby cases? 61% said no. And I am part of that 61%. We were having several perfusionists, like Ashley said, 6 perfusionists, they do it 6 different ways, right? So what we can do with the standards and guidelines is to create a protocol that this is what's expected when you're covering a standby case as a team. Standard 14.2, does your team allow for one-to-one coverage? 92% of us said always. That's awesome. That's the long-term goal, right? That's the way it should be. You can see there's a small percentage that still is having to cover more than one case at a time. That's something that needs to be worked on. And then we also asked, okay, you want a standard and guideline on being readily available. What does that mean to your teams? What are most people doing when they are using a standby pump? We wanted to know, is it in the hall? Is it in the actual OR? Is it primed and ready to go, or is it dry? And you can see there is a wide variety of options. Most people at the 2019 meeting had a dry pump in the OR, including all of your necessary supplies. But you will see there are a lot of options. Some people keep a dry pump, some people keep a wet pump. It's just a matter of what's right for your institution. But this standard 14.3 allows you to take it to your team and say, this is what we're going to provide and be expected as a team. We updated standard 15.1. As you can imagine, 15.1 was not only exciting, but it was also the most controversial guideline that we released, or standard that we released. Does your team follow the N+1 staffing model? As you saw in the examples, several people used this to add another perfusionist. That's fantastic. But you can see that 66% of us still are not able to offer an N+1. That's a lot of team members that are not having a backer available in case of trouble. Standard 16.1. In order for the perfusionist to ensure proper provision of care, he or she shall receive an adequate rest period between scheduled work hours. So we wanted to know what adequate rest period meant to the teams. Does it mean you have 8 hours between your shifts? Some people even get the next day off. But you can see most of the people, we don't have an adequate rest period. So perfusionists are expected to work when there's a need, regardless of hours on or rest periods in between. I think that this is my personal opinion based on people I've talked to. I think this is a standard of care in our profession, which means that we have more work to do on this. We need to take care of our perfusionists. So we also then took this into a guideline. You can see the difference. The standard indicates that they should receive rest, but the guideline says, okay, this is actually what you should be doing. These are your numbers. So the guideline says So we are recommending that your perfusionist should receive a minimum of 8 hours rest period for every 16-hour consecutive work period. And you will see here the answers are that 61% of the teams are able to do this if the clinical schedule allows. So by answering if the clinical schedule allows, that means that there is still a good amount of time where perfusionists don't have that adequate rest period. We work when there's a need, which we all understand that this is exactly why it is so hard to justify perfusion staff to HR. They just don't understand that we have to work regardless of the need. And sometimes there's not need, but sometimes there is need, and that's why we have this struggle. So we worked on this to help you guys. So again, I'm a huge proponent. I want to help you use the standards and guidelines. I want to help you use them at your institution and help your administration understand this is your tool. This document was created to help you, help your teams, help the professional society. We also see that as a profession, we still have a lot of work to do. We need to get our practice where we want it to be, where it should be, and we need to keep using the standards and guidelines in order to get there. The overall goal of the standards and guidelines is to provide that framework for your practice, that foundation that's strong and healthy. It's also to define expectations, what you should be doing, what we recommend you do, and it also reduces variation in practice. Again, we need to improve our patient care as a whole so that a patient receives the same level of care regardless of where they get their surgery done, who is the surgeon, who is the perfusionist. Again, geography should not determine our patient care. So a lot of you have heard me say recently that I believe that we can create a perfusion team and a professional society that is all-inclusive, supportive, and cooperative. And what I mean by that is that when I started this process and started getting involved in these, I found situations where I was trying to create protocols for my team, and I received, oh, this is property of this institution. And I respect that, I do. However, I also think that we, just like the reason that we didn't put it behind a password on AmSECT, if you're going to create a document that's for perfusionists, they have to have access to it. You have to share it. We have to take care of each other. This is not institution to institution. This is perfusion and healthcare as a whole. So this is where we were talking, with Jim, that AmSECT and standard and guidelines, whether you talk about the pediatric one, whether you talk about the adult one, or the additional resources, the anticoagulation and stuff that's on that website. These documents need to be available to the community as a whole. So I'm excited to let you know that another project has come out of the work of the standards and guidelines. And this is something that I'm even more passionate about than the standards and guidelines. I have been assigned and created a committee where we were able to present you with the top 10 guidelines and resources, protocols. Legally, we have to refer to them as guidelines and resources. But what we have done is I'm at an institution where I needed protocols. And I thought, well, if I need protocols, who else needs protocols? And why are we not working on these together? So after years of kind of trying to get this going, we have officially, these top 10 are in our legal department right now. I am hoping, they're a little busy right now with COVID legal issues. So it got a little bit on hold, but I'm hoping in the next 3 months or so, these will be up on the AmSECT website. And the concept of these is to help your teams have a protocol in place. So when you open the protocols, you'll see that it starts off with a little bit of science, and then it talks about the practices that you can do, things that you need to keep in mind. So for example, you get a phone call on a Tuesday night from your surgeon, hey, Shahna, I have a cold agglutinin patient tomorrow. Okay, well, I haven't thought about cold agglutinins in 20 years since I was in school. So you can go to the AmSECT website, you can print off the document for cold agglutinins, you can be reminded of the science, the important parts, and the things that you should do in terms of your circuit, patient care, and just have a great resource for you right there. So these are not an end all, but what these are is to get you started on your own protocols, guidelines, and resources for your departments. You will receive an email soon when these are released on the AmSECT website. And in addition to these top 10, our committee would like to really keep going with this. And the way that we are hoping to do that is we have started a website, or not a website, excuse me, a Facebook group. I'm not I'm not cool enough to have all of social media down, but this is where we have started. This Facebook group is in the beginning stages, but what we were hoping is that we could find a place where you could share protocols, you could exchange them, you can ask questions. Did you include this information in your HIP protocol? Or did you also have, a disclaimer before everything? Or how do I write a protocol? We wanted a place where we could teach each other to write protocols. And if you're on this group, you'll see that most of the time, it's not essentially someone giving a protocol out, which you're welcome to do. You can remove your institution logo, and you can remove, the name if you'd like. But mostly what it does is it helps put people in touch. For example, lately, the whole topic on this Perfusion protocol site, Facebook site, has been COVID. What are you guys doing for PPE? Are you actually writing a protocol? Last week, there was a lot of discussion on the drugs that they are using, or how are you heparinizing your circuits? Are you switching, to heparin? Are you starting out with heparin? Are you switching over? So a lot of those things. So it's a great resource for you to ask questions, teach each other about writing protocols, and get the resources that you need. So again, use the standards and guidelines. Continue the battle, because this does matter. It's important to make a difference. The patient matters, your team matters, and you matter. Use the standards and guidelines to protect your team so that they are not working 16, 24-hour shifts. That's not healthy for them. We all do it, but that doesn't mean it's okay. So use the guideline because it matters. The patient matters, and you matter to the perfusion community. So in summary, I was able to give you a little bit of background and history about how the document was provided. I hope I helped you understand why AmSECT is still investing its resources in these documents. I wanted to show you the survey results from last year and talk to you about how we still need to work on our compliance. And I hope you enjoyed the examples of how people are actually using them in their practice. And also, I hope I was able to teach you a little bit about the updates that have been happening on the document. So what to do now, Shahna? You just talked for a long time about the standards and guidelines. What do I do now? Well, at this point, I usually say safe travels home. But now, because of COVID, I think I get to say safe travels to the living room. All joking aside, take this document. If you're at home, if you're working from home right now, take the document, print it off, highlight each standard, and be honest. Grade your team. Where are you? What do you need to improve on? What are the things that you're not doing? And make a list of what's priority for you. I always like to share, get to work, you guys. This is important and this matters. And always, I love to make a difference. So thank you for your time today. If you want to reach out, we are always looking for committee members to help write the protocols, the guidelines and resources. If you need assistance in writing a protocol, if you're just starting or you have a whole binder of them, let's talk. Join the Facebook group, contact me. If I don't know the answer, I will definitely try to find it for you. I just really appreciate the time. Thank you to the Sanibel group for allowing me to talk about this. And I loved Ashley's presentation. She did such a great job on the pediatric group. And please just let me know if there's anything that I can do. Thank you for your time.